What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. Today I'm going to show you some macros that I've created with GNOME Sequencer Enhanced, an extremely powerful add-on that allows you to create robust macros that can perform most, if not all, of your rotation with a single button. This can be extremely useful if you have a disability like myself, or if you just want to be lazy. Bear in mind that these macros can be extremely helpful, but they also have their limits, so they're made primarily for those who are playing the game at a more casual level. But feel free to use them as you see fit. If you'd like to learn more about GNOME Sequencer and how to use it, I recommend that you head over to Wow Lazy Macros. You can find links to all of that, and to import strings for these macros in the description. Today we're going to check out the macro that I've created for Beast Mastery Hunters. Now, I've done a video for Beast Mastery already in Dragonflight. I've already made a macro, and to be honest, there really haven't been a whole lot of changes since the expansion launched. But I feel like I've made some pretty significant improvements to the actual macro itself, and I wanted to go ahead and make a new video and show that off. So we're going to take it from the top because maybe there are people that haven't seen my other video, or people have forgotten for whatever reason. You never know. And so I feel like it might just be best to take this as if we haven't never done it before. And this is, the updated guide for version 10.1 or whatever. So just like we're doing with every other class. But I just wanted to kind of make that disclaimer first. So let's go ahead and open up the talent tree first, as we always do. We'll go over this build. Like I said, this build is pretty much the exact same as it was when I made my last video. I haven't really changed anything, but there are a few things to go over here. I'll re-explain some things and talk about a couple other things as well. So the first real big thing, honestly, I've taken a lot of talents over here. There are some additions to the rotation that I've added in. I've gone with Death Chakram over Stampede. Stampede's a really cool ability. Has a much longer cooldown, and I really like Death Chakram anyways. So the macro handles it just fine. The cool thing about Beast Mastery Hunters is every single one of their abilities is pretty much an instant cast. Almost every single one of them, which makes it a very easy class to macro. So obviously either way, either one of these abilities will work just fine, but I've gone with Death Chakram just because it's just, like I said, it's a fun ability. Now, I did make a change. I think that Barrage might be a better ability. It might be a little bit more powerful. But it's a channeled ability, and I don't like using channeled abilities in macros that you're spamming. I could add no channeling lines to all of the, commands in the macro, but I would just rather go with an ability that isn't channeled and is an instant cast, and that is Explosive Shot. Also, I have a soft spot in my heart for Explosive Shot, so I went ahead and chose to go with this one. This is what will be in the macro. But, either way, if you were to take Barrage, it would take a lot of extra tooling around with the macro to actually get this one to work, and I don't recommend it just because with macros, channeled abilities are difficult. So whether you cast it and then you move on accident, or because you didn't know you were going to cast it or whatever, there's a lot of factors to consider with channeled abilities. So that's an important one to note. Now, obviously, abilities like Serpent Sting, I'm never going to take Serpent Sting. I don't care if it is like a 10% performance boost. I don't care. For a couple reasons. I don't like dots. If I don't have to use dots, I'm not going to. And also trying to macro this ability would be extremely difficult because it doesn't have a cooldown, and it's just a dot without a cooldown, so that you can't macro those very easily. So yeah, no Serpent Sting, never going to happen for me. But yeah, pretty much, I think that's pretty much everything on this side of the tree. A lot of it's just a lot of passives. I didn't take Steel Trap. Steel Trap is another one that I would probably never take, and that's just because it's a target location ability, and we are a ranged class. That's not going to work very well. The only way I can make target location abilities work, seamlessly in a macro is to add the @player command, and that would mean it would put the trap at your feet. And since you're not in melee range, that's not going to work out very well. So no Steel Trap. You'd have to manage it separately. So just another thing to note. Okay. So looking at the actual tree itself, I've taken a lot of a lot of passives, as many passives as I can, but there obviously are some inclusions in here as well. So, for example, I love Animal Companion. Adding a second pet, and running around with 2 pets is awesome, and that's just a passive. It's easy, no sweat. But I've also taken Dire Beast. you know, this adds an extra ability to the rotation, but it's such a cool ability. It's really strong. I love using it. So that's obviously in there, you know, and then the other one is a Murder of Crows. You could either go with a Murder of Crows or Bloodshed. Both of these will work just fine in the macro. But I went with the Murder of Crows for a couple reasons. One of the biggest ones is I do a lot of outdoor content, and having this ability reset every time you kill your target is great for outdoor content. But you could go either way. Just the Murder of Crows is what's in the actual macro itself. So then obviously there's a lot of the obvious abilities like Bestial Wrath, you know, the basics. And then you kind of come down here to the bottom, and this is again where, you know, I've added in a couple of little things here. Just like I said, a lot of passives, you know, a lot of just straightforward stuff like that. I'm not gonna, you know, I Call the Wild, you know, is fine, but it's another ability. It's an instant cast. I just, you know, I'd rather just avoid adding too many abilities. We've already added a lot in here. You know, this class actually has a decent amount of abilities, so not trying to add too many. The more abilities you have, the harder the macro, the harder it is on the macro. Just trying to cycle through everything. So, you know, just trying to keep it as simple as possible, work out pretty well. The last thing I do want to mention, I didn't go with multi-shot and beast cleave. There might be situations where you would want to go with this. So if you're going to, you know, take a build where maybe you need more AoE or, you know, more cleave, just know that multi-shot is not in the macro. And honestly, it doesn't need to be, because the only time you use multi-shot is to keep beast cleave up. So what I would do is, if you take multi-shot, if you go with that and you're going to try to use my macro, just use multi-shot on a separate button, and you know, make sure you have enough focus, which you should be able to squeeze it in there. You know, but either way, like you could probably add it in a way into the macro, but I just don't take it. I don't like dealing with it, so I didn't. But you know, you could probably add in a modifier, you know, in there with Cobra Shot, and you might be able to make it work. But either way, like it's just for beast cleave, really. I mean, you really wouldn't use it any other way, I guess. So just something to keep in mind, but it's just not included in the macro. So that's pretty much everything. Like I said, a lot of instant cast abilities. Try not to take too many extra abilities if we can avoid it, in favor of passes, as always. Remember, you know, these builds are not designed for min-maxing. They're designed to make the macro work as easy and as effectively as possible. So that's always something to keep in mind. But with that being said, let's go ahead and open up GNOME Sequencer Enhanced by typing /GSE. And the macro that we're going to be using is called KEF-BM. And this is an all-in-one macro for Beast Mastery Hunters. Now, if you want to use my talent tree, my build, you can just copy this line up here. Just, you know, copy and paste it into your talent tree, and you can use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual macro itself. Now, we are using a sequential macro, and we're doing that in favor of a priority macro, which is what this was in the past. And the reason why is because a sequential macro seems to perform much better than a priority macro when you have so many abilities. These days, you know, WoW has, I mean, each class has a ton of abilities, and the more abilities you have, the more, especially when they have cooldowns, the easier it is to just use a sequential macro in favor of a priority one. So that's kind of what I've gone with here. And, you know, there are a couple of things. I'm kind of excited about this one because I've made some discoveries, you know, like, I guess, like, you know, just some improvements to this macro, like I said, and just some things that I think will help me with a lot of other macros with certain abilities. We'll get there, you know, but yeah, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, I'm excited. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this is a very straightforward macro. It's going to start off with Barb Shot. And Barb Shot, you know, it's one of those abilities that you can either just use it when it's available, but it might also be more effective to hold it for certain situations, trying to keep the, you know, the dot up as much as possible, the bleed going as much as possible. So, you know, whether you're like, if you care about like having control over Barb Shot, just know that in this macro, it's going to use it as soon as it gets to it. It's just going to keep it on cooldown, use all of its charges, you know, or whatever. So try to keep that in mind. You know, that's just something that comes with using macros. There's not a lot of, you know, player discretion involved. It's just going to use the abilities on cooldown. So yeah, that's kind of important. Next up is Bestial Wrath. Unfortunately, Bestial Wrath is not off the global cooldown, even though it's a, you know, it's a DPS cooldown, but it does require a global cooldown tick. So I have to put it in the main macro. And I wish this wasn't the case. I wish I could put it in a different part of this macro and treat it like an off global cooldown ability, but it's not, because Blizzard doesn't want their cooldowns to be off the global cooldown, and I hate that personally. I prefer the old way where everything was on the off the global cooldown, and you could just hit a cooldown button and just go crazy. But that's not the WoW we play these days, I guess. So Bestial Wrath has to be included in the main, sequence of the macro. Combat command added in to make sure you're not accidentally hitting this when you're out of combat, because that would not be great. You waste it. So at least it'll wait for you to be in combat. Next up is a Murder of Crows. Straightforward. Going to use that when it's available. Followed by Kill Command. Now this one's obviously very important. I've considered putting Kill Command a couple times in this sequence, but I haven't. It didn't seem too necessary. But it's an ability that does have a relatively short cooldown. It's going to reset a lot. Extra charges or whatever, like whatever your build's doing. So you want to try to use this one as much as possible and keeping, focus, to use it as soon as it's available. And the macro is going to do its best. There are a lot of abilities to get through in this rotation, and this macro is going to try to get through them all as quickly as possible, but I can't guarantee that you're going to be keeping things on cooldown as soon as they become available. The macro is going to be cycling through abilities, so that's kind of the way it is. But that's just something to note here with Kill Command, because it is, a priority in the macro or in the rotation to keep this one on cooldown. So, something to take note of. Next up, we have Dire Beast, cooldown ability, straightforward. Kill Shot when the target's in execution range. And then, of course, we have Death Chakram. And then we have Explosive Shot. So, there's a lot in here. There are 8 different abilities in the core rotation, not including Cobra Shot, which we'll get into, but there's a lot of cooldown abilities to get through. The macro is going to do its best to get through them as quickly as possible and try to keep them all on cooldown the best it can. But since there are so many, and since some of them reset, there are going to be times where one may not be used as quickly as you might want it to. So it's just important to tether your expectations and keep that in mind, okay? So we have added a special thing in this macro with the way it's going to work, where if it's going to go through this sequence twice. We have it set to repeat twice, and it's going to go down, come back up, go down again, and then we have our bottom ability. And this is something new that I've tried out, and I really like how it works. We have Cobra Shot outside of the loop sequence, and the idea here is that we want the macro to use Cobra Shot, but not too much. If I put the Cobra Shot in the sequence, then you'd never have enough focus to use Kill Command, and it's not good. It really hurts your DPS not being able to use Kill Command, and sometimes it'll just keep using Cobra Shot over Kill Command just because of where it is at the sequence, at the time, and sometimes you just don't ever get to use Kill Command. So I was having a problem where I was using Cobra Shot too much. I was trying out different things. I tried old school tactics like adding cast sequences to try to limit the amount of Cobra Shots I use with, linking them to other abilities. I didn't like that. It just didn't feel that great. And then I realized, oh yeah, this add-on has changed a lot, and there are some other options. And so this is what I've gone with. So what's going to happen is the macro, like I said, it's going to loop through the main sequence twice, and then it will use a Cobra Shot. And once it does that, it'll go back, loop through the sequence twice again, and then try to use Cobra Shot again. Now, obviously, if there are times where you'll be spamming the macro, the macro is going through its off global cooldown, it'll go past Cobra Shot and go back to the sequence. But if you're spamming it enough and you're going through it relatively quickly, you're going to be hitting Cobra Shot fairly often enough to at least hopefully keep your focus from sitting at max, because that's not what you want. You don't want your focus to be empty all the time so that you can't use Kill Command, but you also don't want your focus to be sitting maxed out and not recharging, because then technically you're wasting it, right? So you want to use Cobra Shot as a filler ability, and also to keep yourself from overcapping your focus, your resource. Every class has one, right? So that's kind of the idea there. And so this way, doing it this way will hopefully prevent you from using Cobra Shot too much, but not too rare either. That's kind of the idea. So I've put it at 2 loops seems to be the sweet spot. I've tried 3 was okay, but I did find myself capping out focus a little bit more, so I've done it at 2. If you feel like you're using Cobra Shot too much, too little, you can change this. You can do, wouldn't be a point in doing 1, so no less than 2. But if you feel like you're using Cobra Shot too much, too much, then maybe try 3. Obviously, you could go up to 4 or 5. However, I don't recommend going past. Honestly, in my experience, I think anything higher than 3 might be too much. But yeah, try 3 if you think 2 is happening too often with Cobra Shot, and just kind of use your own discretion. But that's one of the biggest changes that I've made, and it's significantly improved the performance of the macro in my opinion. So let me know what you think about that. But before we finish up here, let's go down to the bottom, and we have our key press, key release. This is where we do a lot of just the behind the scenes mechanical off global cooldown stuff, right? So we have our standard target fair under key press. Now I at one point had /pet attack in here to ensure that your pet would be attacking your target, but I have to say, in my experience with these macros, anytime I have put pet attack in the macro itself, it has led to some disastrous results for me, accidentally sending my pet to attack enemies that I did not intend on doing. So I don't recommend that you do that. Just keep your pet in assist mode or whatever. Maybe add a separate macro for commanding your pet, or hotkey or whatever you want to do. But I do not recommend putting pet attack in your actual macro, because you can kill an enemy, you can keep spamming away, and then suddenly your pet's going off attacking some other enemy. And if you're in a dungeon, it can be a disaster, and then you get kicked. It's just a mess. Never happened to me, but yeah. So yeah, I don't recommend it. So that's why pet attack isn't in here. Under key release, we just have our our pet commands, claw, bite, smack, that stuff, just depending on what type you have. And it'll use that, keeping that being used passively as you're playing. So that's kind of the idea with that. But that's pretty much everything about this macro and how it works. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button, and feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.